Episode 1111, Dan Camp on whitewater rafting in northern Wisconsin.
You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to bring you the inspiration and motivation you need to get started in the outdoors or to keep you moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Kurt Linville.
Hi friends, thanks for joining us today. I'm kind of chuckling because I was thinking earlier today that when I produce the episode for tomorrow, maybe I should share some of the little mini adventures that I have done in the last couple of weeks. But I thought, I don't know, I don't want to talk about myself. But I also thought, people maybe would appreciate knowing that I'm trying to kind of practice what I preach a little bit, and that I do try to get out there and do the adventures and have fun. So as I was pondering all of that, I didn't remember what this episode was. And we recorded this episode about 5 weeks ago. So I decided when I was producing this episode just now, it's just too funny. So I have to tell you what I did in the last week because it actually aligns with this episode so much. A friend of mine heard the episode where I was talking about adventures for everyone. And one of the adventures that I talked about was if you don't want to afford getting into scuba diving, maybe even try snorkeling in streams and rivers and things like that. Well, this friend came to me and said, we got to do that. So I did. We went snorkeling down the Gunnison River, and it's a Class 2 most of the way with a few Class 3 drops. And so we're snorkeling Class 3 whitewater. That might be a slight exaggeration. But it was a ton of fun. Saw so many huge fish. It was unbelievable. And I knew they were down there, but they were very, very difficult to catch. But man, I would kind of float over a hole or a low spot in the river, and there might be a dozen of them, and they were brown trout and rainbow trout, and not small ones. We're talking about 18-inchers that are thick and fat. And anyway, beautiful, beautiful fish. I also saw a lake trout in the river, which I did not expect to see, but this was a long lake trout, probably 20 inches long, maybe 24. Anyway, I thought, did I just see what I thought I saw? Because they're down in the lake below the river. But anyway, it was an amazing experience, and the best way to describe it is with the current, especially it was fairly shallow right now, you feel like you're flying, and the bottom is just soaring right under you. And then when you come to a rapid, you don't see it until it's right on you, And my funniest memory was when I lifted my head and I saw my friend just kind of sloop over, or slurp over might even be a better way to say it, a Class 3 drop. It was hilarious, and it was a lot of fun. It was not the first time that I've done something like this, but it was the first time in a very long time. And the illusion of flying might have been my favorite part, on top of seeing all of the natural aquatic environment. Well, then yesterday, my son and I went up to Taylor Reservoir. I don't know how high it is. It's probably 10,000 feet or something. Cold water, and we were looking for pike. And right now, the grasses in the reservoir have grown into kind of underwater jungles, and we were hoping to see the pike that like to hide in the grass. But anyway, we probably spent 3 hours snorkeling in that high-altitude mountain reservoir, cold water. We were shivering. We did have on wetsuits, but it was still very cold. We got in and out 3 different times, and the last time getting back in the water, man, I was like, really? I'm already shivering. I'm going to jump back in this icy bath, but we did it, and it was an amazing experience. So I have to bring that up just because didn't remember that we talked about it. But in this very episode, Dan and I talked about river snorkeling, riverboarding, the things that I actually kind of did this week. So it cracked me up. But anyway, sorry. Thank you for bearing with me as I share that. Hope you are likewise getting out there and having your little mini adventures and having a lot of fun. This is going to be a fun episode about adventure sports benefits in general, but also a lot about kayaking and whitewater rafting and all the beautiful whitewater sports. So here we go. Hey, friends, thank you again for joining the Adventure Sports Podcast today. We're going to talk about several topics with the general manager of Wildman Adventure Resort. And this is Dan Camp. And I think, Dan, first of all, love the name. It fits the
Yeah.
vibe so much.
A lot of people think I'm joking when I tell them that that's my name. So I've had people be like, "Let me see your driver's license." It is truly my last name.
Well, I interviewed Moose the other day, as the listeners probably remember, and I was like, come on, Moose, is that real? But anyway, Dan Camp, Wildman Adventure Resort. Here's the subject matter. We're going to talk about northern Wisconsin because it's kind of surprising the adventures that are available up there. When I think of Wisconsin, I don't really have a context for what northern Wisconsin is. And so Dan's going to fill us in on all of that, and it sounds super cool. We're going to talk about whitewater because that's a lot of what Dan does. And we're going to talk a little bit about guiding and outfitting and what that's about and why it matters. But think of this show as one part travel episode to northern Wisconsin, one part whitewater, one part guiding, and you kind of have a feel for where we're headed. So, Dan, welcome to the program.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me, Kurt.
Yeah, it's fun. So, there are a lot of places in the U.S. that surprise people when they go there. And
Mhm.
forgive me for being naive, but I've not spent hardly any time in Wisconsin. But when I thought of Wisconsin, I was not thinking about northern Wisconsin, right?
Right.
So describe what that's like.
Yeah, it's a hidden gem, and part of me really enjoys that. For example, last week we're mid-season right now, so things are crazy here at Wildman. But I had the opportunity to take my mountain bike out, and there's some really world-class mountain biking trails. I can ride my bike from our outpost, hop on the trails, and I don't see another human being. It's great. They
Wow.
don't see me when I go over my handlebars either, which is a common occurrence. But I think about the other places I've traveled to and visited to, and had the opportunity to recreate outdoors. And typically, you're bumping elbows with people, you're pushing
Yeah,
people off. You're trying to do your thing. And up here, it is kind of a hidden gem. And I think it's because of what you just mentioned. You don't really think of this being like an outdoor recreation sports mecca, but we have a lot of the
right.
same things you would have in a lot of places like Colorado or West Virginia. It's just people don't know about it. So instead of it being like cheese and Packers, we're like, an hour and a half north of Green Bay. We have two different locations. One of them's tucked along the Chiquamagon-Nicolet National Forest, right
Okay.
on the Peshtigo River. And think like Pacific Northwest vibes with the river running through, delete the mountains out of the background. That's kind of the feel at this location on the Peshtigo River. And then on the Menominee River, there's like topography, and there's truly a gorge through Pierce Gorge, which is our class four section of rapids. And I did
Right
say
on.
class four in Wisconsin. People
Right.
don't think of class four whitewater. It's a short stretch, it's about a quarter mile long, but it's a very exciting stretch. It's very fun. People are often shocked that it exists there. So, in a place maybe you would never have dreamt it to be, is a spot for people to do a lot more than just fish or ride their ATVs or UTVs around.
You know what, Dan, to be really candid with you, when I thought about whitewater in Wisconsin, I thought they're pushing class two, maybe. you
Right? I
know,
know. I get it.
maybe. And you have true class four. And matter of fact, there's some videos on your website, just, at the banner at the top. It's big. There's some big
Yeah.
stuff in there.
We take guests that have gone, coast to coast, done some whitewater. I've been lucky enough to do a lot of river trips, and I'm always impressed by the Pierce Gorge section on the Menominee just being such a large rapid. It's fairly there's not as many undercuts or sieves or the things you think traditionally would be very dangerous, in that
Right.
section of whitewater, which makes it really good for first timers. That's one of the draws for me to be here, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but I love introducing people to the sport and having a stretch of river that's kind of perfect for that. And we run that section twice, so we actually will trailer a raft, drop it off above, run the rapid, and then the guides have a really unique opportunity to take their guests out of the boat, lead them on a little hiking expedition back up Piers Gorge. You talk about
Oh,
hydrology, you talk about history. Everybody's a little different. Some people have jokes. I'm not very funny, so I talk about the birds and some stories and stuff. So it's a cool opportunity for people to see the rapid and then do it again, as opposed to running, several rapids in a day. Just a different feel entirely.
Yeah, and every trip down a river is different.
Correct. Yeah, that's part of my lessons to live by before our second trip through Piers Gorge is you're never the same as you were last time, and neither was the river. So it's a good lesson to learn.
You know that the rapids may still be there, but the water's constantly moving and shifting, and your line is everything, depending on what you hit and what you miss. And I really enjoy doing things multiple times because of the way the experience develops. So I think that's cool. I've never heard of a rafting trip where you can do it twice.
Yeah,
So,
it's unique in that way.
all right, on. So you mentioned earlier, just before I hit record, that you think of where you are as the North
Yeah.
less than Wisconsin. Maybe, it's more like in your mind, this is the North. What do you mean by that?
I grew up in central Illinois, just outside of Springfield, Illinois, a little town called Rochester. And my backyard was a cornfield or a bean field, depending on the year. And to me,
Yeah.
that's like the heart of the Midwest, right? You know, hot summers, muggy summers, the winters were kind of temperate. But it was like corn and beans. And if you wanted to do anything like what we do up here, like I always thought, for me, it was Missouri. My dad had always made an effort to get us outside. And so we went to Missouri a ton. But my very first trip as a little guy was around Lake Michigan. So around some of the stuff that
Okay.
I'm around now. And that kind of like set the pace for the rest of my life so far was outdoors and doing stuff like that. But in the Midwest, the true heart of the heartland, there in central Illinois, I didn't have mountain biking trails that I could just ride my bike to. I didn't have rivers that I
Mm,
could go jump in and swim or do class, 2 to 4 whitewater. So I think of this as kind of a separate space. I think once you get like north of Green Bay, like it kind of changes. People who have been
right.
to the UP of Michigan kind of get that feel of like it's the woods. It's kind of like this different space up here. So I think once you get far enough north, we kind of like leave the Midwest. Now you don't leave the Midwestern hospitality, which is really nice. That sticks around. But yeah, the landscape changes.
I don't know if I should even tell this, but I'm going to. My my son went to college in Iowa, and he obviously found the hospitality wonderful, but he says, "Dad, they're so nice they can't get anything done. No one will ever make a decision. They're just like, what do you want to do? No, I want to do what you want to do." He was like, it just sometimes it became too much for me. It did too much kindness. But
Yeah, the
that's actually
Midwestern
it's a
goodbye.
good
That's
problem
a
to
true
have,
thing.
isn't it?
It is absolutely a good thing. You have good neighbors. You have great places to hang out. Yeah, I can't really complain. Like I said, something's always drawn me back here, and that's part of it.
So, what types of sports would you say are pretty common up there? We've already talked about whitewater, which, I was surprised at, but I get it. And you mentioned mountain biking. Sounds great. I mean, what do
Mm-hmm.
people do in that area?
Traditionally, it's not the things that we're doing. It's traditionally fishing, whether it's ice fishing or going out on the boat and fishing that way. I think ATVs and UTVs and hunting are primarily what people think of when they think of recreating outdoors in
Okay.
this space, which is totally fine. There's definitely, I mean, there's a ton of space up here for all those different things. What we're doing is kind of offering the alternative to that, and that is, like motorless trips and human powered expeditions and
Mm,
things that, and not that fishing and UTV riding doesn't do this, but there's something special that is fostered during adventure sports that you connect with your family or your teammates, whoever you're with during that adventure, bachelorette parties, something happens when you're staring down the pipe of a class 4 rapid or playing paintball or jumping off a zip line tower that is truly special. And so I think what we do as far as our human powered recreation sports up here is a little bit different than what it has traditionally been in northern Wisconsin, which is, like I said, a lot of UTVs, ATVs, fishing, hanging out in the cabin, going out on the lake. We're offering something that's probably more on the verge of people's comfort zones. It's probably a little bit easier to go out and grab your fishing gear and hop on the side of the lake and spend the day picnic, which is a beautiful, beautiful afternoon. But might not be as easy to convince everybody to hop into a 16-foot raft and listen to a stranger they just met. So I think we're offering that alternative, and I think people are finding it and enjoying mixing it up a little bit.
yeah. Dan, I totally get where you're coming from. I grew up in northeastern Oklahoma, and I'm in Colorado now. But when when people ask where I was originally from and I say Oklahoma, they start describing the plains and the wheat fields and the red carpet country, just red clay dirt everywhere. That's what everyone thinks of. And I say, no, that's not where I grew up.
Right.
Because the northeastern corner of Oklahoma is in the foothills of the Ozarks. So
Hmm.
everything that you just described about northern Wisconsin fits northeastern Oklahoma, only the winters are a little warmer.
Right.
But so I had to explain to people, no, that's a part of Oklahoma you probably haven't thought of. We
Right.
have small mountains, we have clear running streams and rivers and beautiful clear lakes. People go scuba diving in them because they're clear. They can see and enjoy it. And what's cool about it is it's close to areas where people don't have those types of experiences. They don't have to travel as far to go do something completely different, right?
Hmm.
And so in the Midwest, you think about northern Wisconsin, and it might be way more convenient than trying to get
Right.
out to Wyoming or Colorado or Idaho or something. So makes sense.
Without a doubt. And I think that's like one of our greatest things that we can do for people is offer them that alternative to making that cross country road trip. And it's oftentimes in their backyard. So think of someone in Chicago. That's 4 or 5 hours away from Wisconsin. For some people, that's like a really long drive. I've lived in
Yeah.
places where that's like going to the supermarket. So for me, it seems pretty short. But um, to have a resource where you can hop in and go do something, whether it's a day trip or a multi-day thing where you're coming up and doing several activities. And I should also give credit to the rest of Wisconsin. There's some really beautiful places in Wisconsin. Like the
Sure.
Dells are beautiful, Devil's Lake, the Drift List. There's a lot of beautiful places to come see in Wisconsin. But I do believe that ours is one of the like least known of up here in the northeast corner. People know Door County, people know Green Bay, but they don't understand exactly what kind of beautiful outdoor resources we have in this space that are
Yeah.
unlike anything unless you travel, like you said, to Wyoming or down to West Virginia. And it's a lot further drive for a lot of people who are centrally located here in the Midwest, whether it's Minneapolis, Madison, Milwaukee, Chicago. There's a lot of urban centers within a day's drive of where we are, where people can come in and leave the city lights a little bit and connect with a guide and someone who's trained to do it.
All right, let's talk about whitewater a little bit. I mean, a lot of people have done whitewater rafting as, something you did on vacation or at summer camp or whatever, but there's a lot more to it than that. How did you get started?
That's a great question. I was listening to some of your shows, like preparing for this, and I was listening to a lot of. There's so many Midwest to Colorado, or to Wyoming, or to Oregon, like people that they find their way out there and they stay out there. I think like I went out and came back, which was kind of funny. But my first time ever going whitewater rafting, I was probably like 14. My dad planned this huge trip for us to go to Glacier National Park, and we went
Mm,
on the middle fork of the Flathead, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. It never really hit my head that I could like do that as a job. And so it wasn't until I was graduating from college that I called my dad. And I at the time had wanted to be a park ranger. I wanted to be the guy who stands on the side of the hill and tells people about what's going on, history or nature. I loved that. And so I dual majored in history and biology. I had this whole path. And then I got to the application process and I was like, oh man, this is dry. This is
yeah.
dry. Then I started thinking about wearing polyester pants every day. Oh man, I don't know if this is for me. So I'm calling my dad. I'm getting ready to graduate. And I'm like, dude, I don't know. I don't know what to do. He's like, go be a raft guide. You'll figure it out. Like, go be a raft guide for the summer, figure it out. So I got on coolworks.com, which is a great resource for seasonal workers. And I saw class four whitewater rafting, northern Wisconsin. And I did the same thing that you probably did, which is I said, no way. It's class
Right.
two at best, right? And I got on with the owner and we talked and I saw the videos. And I'm like, oh, no, I have an opportunity to get in as a rookie guide and guide class four my first year. Like, that's unheard of. I'm going to go do that
Yeah.
and came in and just took to it. I just loved the water. I just loved being in the back of a raft. I loved having like that captive audience for a couple hours and then train them out for the next captive audience. You can try your jokes out and find what sticks. I loved introducing people to the sport and being a part of it. part of me when I was a younger man back then, but I just loved like falling in and like having the exciting experiences
Yeah.
too. So there's part of that. I don't love that as much anymore. But after that, it just was a itch I couldn't fully scratch, and I saw the power that happens in those moments on the river and the special places. And since then, I've done Grand Canyon trip. I'm getting ready for a Middle Fork salmon trip. I've done tons of day trips, across the country, and it's the same. It's the same magic. It's the same types of people. It's the same
Right.
atmosphere, the excitement, and the general like respect of those natural places between the groups, the love that is shared between the people and the places. And the more I immersed myself, the more I decided like I want to be involved with that as long as I possibly can. I'm going to ride this out until I can't anymore. And that's what I've been able to do through a lot of luck and just knowing the right people. But it's been, I can't imagine not spending a life that didn't have whitewater, planted at the heart of it.
And it was all because of polyester pants.
Polyester pants, man. I wouldn't have done well.
I'm just kind of trying to imagine the lifestyle. What you're describing, I bet there are a lot of people are like, seriously, that sounds so great. I mean, what is the lifestyle like? Do you get? I know when you do the same thing over and over again, it starts to feel like it's over and over again. But what is it like to be a raft guide?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot for me since I stepped back behind a computer more than I used to. In
Yeah,
my rookie years, it was all about lifting boats and being strong and who could do the most pull-ups and push-ups. There were times where we would go drop all the boats off and wait for our guests, and we would just rep out push-ups, be covered in baby oil when the guests showed up. It was like a WWE wrestling match. So for a long time, it was like the excitement, the body mind connection of working with your, physically, being on the water. I mean, there were afternoons where I just float through the water with a bunch of people I just met, and then take them rafting through some class four water. I thought that was pretty cool. Like I didn't know how it would get much better. Now anybody in the industry knows like you're not gonna get rich as a river guide. That was something that money's never been a huge motivator for me. I understand, where it stands and what we
yeah.
need to do with it. But for me, man, being wealthy is like having those moments and those friendships and getting to do that on a regular basis. And, my parents early on were like, when's he going to grow out of this? And then once they realized I wasn't going to, we kind of shifted gears. But as a raft guide, I mean, it's just so freeing. It's really, I mean, you work real hard for a couple months. Being available, the more available you are, the more trips you can pick up, the more people you can take out on trips, more money
Right.
you can make. You're living, I lived out of tents, I lived out of broke down buses, I lived out of vans, hammocks. It's truly very freeing. You know what you need and you kind of drop the rest, which I know kind of sounds like an extreme for a lot of people to get rid of those things. And I don't know if I could do it the way I used to anymore, but I still got my old van and all those little bits and pieces. So while I might have settled down a little bit from that, I think no matter how long you do it, you're still kind of tied to the feral working every day, hanging out with your friends every day, and doing work that you feel really matters. So, but eventually you got to transition to what I call pro guide mode. So you go
Okay.
from
Pro
like
guide.
this is cultivated from my mentor Ken Newman, who's the owner of the business here. He told me one day you got to be as happy that the bus is leaving without you on it, full of happy guests, than you do waiting at the put in for them to get there. And I thought he was crazy when he first told me that. And that was, probably 6 or 7 years ago. And now I know what he means. I can watch a bus load up and take off, and I'm like, there's 40 people who are going to go meet their five guides and have an absolute blast the next 3 or 4 hours.
Wow.
And it's taking that satisfaction that you once felt from rafting class four, being in the water, all those bits and pieces, and transitioning it to the same kind of feeling, but watching other people leave without you and go do it with other people. And
You know you're making it possible on some level, and there's a vicarious joy.
correct. Yeah. And I think that's what makes this career field sustainable for people as you get older. I was listening to the episode with Zeb and he's talking about, a lot
Yeah.
of the workforce is like 16 to like 24. And that's not dissimilar to what we have. Ours are probably average 19 to like 26. And then after that, they go get their big boy jobs or whatever you want to call it, and they leave because they don't see the path forward. And I think it's like pretty imperative in the industry right now for us to start finding those paths forward for people to continue living the lifestyle and building around it. And I think being in that pro guide mode, that really, you got to find that space because, as you said, like you're going to get tired of doing the same thing over and over and over again. But if you
Sure.
can find some enjoyment every day in that, kind of the same way the river's not the same every day,
Yeah.
then you can get really good at it.
I want to say something, Dan, and I'm going to confess. I still wrestle with this, okay? But I want to just throw it out there and see what your feeling is on it. I have so many acquaintances and friends who are struggling to save enough retirement so that they won't have to work anymore. And I fear for them because when they do retire, they just so many of them have lost the ability to do the things they love to do because they aged out. And they aged out because they sat at a desk for a lifetime. Not necessarily because they're 70 or 65 or whatever the magic number is, but because they just weren't doing it.
Hmm.
And then I see other people that sometimes people frown on. You were just saying, my folks are like, well, when's he going to grow up? But it's like, no, they're living the dream now. And yeah, retirement's not going to be so cozy, maybe, but at the same time, maybe it will be okay. I don't know. But the way that I've always thought of it is if you're not enjoying every day, then something's wrong. That doesn't mean ignoring responsibility. It means choosing the lifestyle that is the most meaningful and rewarding for you. But I still struggle with this, Dan, because there's the, well, but people should have a retirement, you
Right.
know? So reflect on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think about this often. Like I said, no one's really in this industry to go buku cash. Some people luck out and that happens for them, but the majority of us that are doing this are doing it because we love the work. And if we can make some money
Yeah.
along the way, that's pretty cool. I can speak on my own experience. I have very little money like saved away, like some of my friends do, who started working, great jobs right out of college, or picked up jobs out of high school and worked, construction work or those types of things. But I don't have any of those people that don't tell me sometimes that they wish that they were in my shoes
Yeah.
or see how much time I get out or the things I've gotten to do. And wish that maybe they had some time to do that, but work's busy and all that. So I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. What I do think, and you alluded to this, is that there's a right way for you, and that's what's got to matter.
Yes.
Is it right for me? And it's hard to sometimes go against the status quo, or for me, what people might have expected your life to look like. If you go back and you read those letters to self when you were a kid, and
Mm.
according to that, I'm married now, I have kids, and I play in the NFL. So uh, obviously that didn't work out, but I'd still like to think that the if that young man could look and see like how happy I am on a daily basis and the effects of the work we're doing here at Wildman and the outdoor industry as a greater whole. I think he'd be equally as proud that we're here and doing something that we're passionate about and something that makes us feel wealthy without it, necessarily coinciding with a retirement account. Now, that all sounds great, but I do think there needs to be like financial literacy built in to
Sure.
leaders in the outdoor industry. So we are constantly bringing up younger generations through what we've been through, especially the people who started off as guides and found themselves sticking around long enough to push paper. So I think there's a obligation to us who have been lucky enough to find, I call them like a unicorn job where we can pay our bills and continue to do work that we find that matters, to be finding ways to educate people on how to start building retirement accounts earlier and how to manage your tip money. It's real tempting to go buy a 30 rack of PBR when you get that $20 bill at the end of a trip. But maybe don't do it every week. Maybe you don't need to do that. Maybe you could stash some in a jar, and at the end of the year, you put that into a Roth IRA. Well, what's a Roth IRA? Cool opportunity to learn something that I probably learned too late in life. I can teach them a little bit earlier. So I think the people who have been fortunate enough to lived these lifestyles, found a way to make it work for themselves, stayed wealthy spiritually, and all of that to pass along the things that took us too long to learn to the next generation to make this a sustainable amount. So when somebody's mom asks me, "Look, how do you save for retirement?" You can tell them like an honest answer that's going to make them feel better about their kids. Maybe come to join us for a summer.
Hey, that's well said. It's kind of a big deal to me as the host of the Adventure Sports podcast, the co-founder. I remember the first year or so saying, I really believe in what we're doing here
Hmm.
because when people get out, get active, connect with nature, have more fun, make friends, build a social life around it, they start teaching their kids an active lifestyle instead of being couch potatoes. They get off the screens and start experiencing the reality of nature. And there's so many positive benefits. I just go crazy. I geek out over this stuff because it makes such a difference. But, and here's the but, it was like, are we just being hedonists? Are we valuing fun over responsibility that we really ought to be doing?
Right.
And I'll say it this way: if there's not a tension there, then you might need to think it through a little bit. There should be a tension there, right? So,
Yeah, well, you had mentioned before, and I didn't touch on this, but the fact that a lot of people who are doing these jobs are creating these stories and this life experience that a lot of people wait
yeah,
till they retire to do. I mean, we've all been around someone who went too soon. I think everybody listening to this would has lost somebody too soon. And I think we can always talk about people who are at the end of their days, and they always wish I had done blank. I wish I had done
mm-hmm,
more, right? I wish I had loved
right,
more. I wish I had spent more time with my people. And I do think it's a dual edged sword. There's two very important parts of this. Set yourself up for, a sustainable future for yourself, but also like don't forget to look up while hiking, you know, quit looking at
right.
your feet so much and see what's out there. Listen to the birds, take a breath. I have a expression my friend Maddie told me not too long ago, and she said, at the end of the day, it's just rafting. And so I'll find myself like bent out of shape about something or something's not going the way I wanted it to. And it's like, hey, it's just rafting. And at the end of the day. And so like that has like been my mantra. Take a deep breath. And you could do that with anything. Hey, this is just accounting. Hey, this is just blank. And it just allows you a second to reset, be grateful to be in the moment that you're in. And not everybody's going to be a whitewater rafter or want to be a guide, but I think everybody can find that in like their day to day. And if that's what serves you, then that's great. But I love your point of don't wait until you can't do the things that you want to try, because that
Yes,
stinks. You can't go back.
exactly. And I'm publishing an episode actually for tomorrow, and so that's going to be several weeks ago by the time this one posts. But a big part of that episode is how great adventure sports can be for families.
Hmm.
It's easy to think of it as selfish, even if I'm just going out to have fun all the time. But whenever you realize that you can teach your family how to enjoy nature and be active and healthy and have that outlet. I think most of us work jobs that hopefully we're okay with, but sometimes are a real drag. And, but if you have an adventure sport that you can do in the evenings or on the weekends or on holidays, then it can enrich your life so much. It really helps to get out of the daily grind. We get caught in these loops, I think, so easily. Go to work, go home, go to work, go home, go to work, go home. And life's not really meant to be that. And so maybe I'm pontificating a little bit here, but teaching your kids to value activity with other people outside.
Yeah, I listened to one of your episodes. It was talking about your son and the adventures you had been through that kind of shaped
Yeah,
their life,
yeah,
and I was just giggling. It's fun to hear those stories, and a lot of them have a moment that wasn't so fun in the middle, like where's this kid at, And I think that those moments, it's pretty easy in this day and age to get caught up in like what's dangerous. Everything's dangerous. Life is dangerous. Getting in the car to go anywhere is dangerous.
yes.
There's scary things out there, and I think at Wildman we focus intensely on that feeling that people are feeling around their kids, whether it's they're
Mm,
coming with a camp or they are
right.
coming with they're coming with a different family or an extended group, or just coming with mom and dad. I think that you have to have dirt on hand moments as a child to like
Yeah.
continue learning that the world isn't as scary as everybody wants you to think it is. And you have to, a lot of people show up and they don't think they can fall into the rapids. This is the best example I can think of. I'm like, first of all, you didn't read anything before you got here. That's pretty standard. But yeah, falling into a rapid is an inherent risk of whitewater rafting. And if you didn't have that risk, you probably wouldn't go. And they think about it, and like, yeah, I guess that is part of what makes it fun that I could fall into the rapids. And so
Yeah.
you're kind of like explaining to people that these are things that are inherently a little risky or a little dangerous. But then you put people out there, and like I said, our focus is very intensely on this part of putting people out there in the best possible conditions to thrive in that space. And that's having what? Well, well-trained guides, but like the hard skills are
Oh, yeah.
great. So swiftwater rescue training, days on end of flipping rafts and getting back in them, and how do I cross the river, and how do I save people and get them back to their boats, but also empathetic people, people who are going to see you as you, who are going to love on you for being out there. We have a guide named Casey who's helped several people from panic attacks.
Oh,
And
wow.
a lot of our guides could do this, but he's the best. And that's just because this guy cares. He's like a big grizzly bear and he cares about the people, and they feel that. And that's the culture that we've worked really hard to create, is a space where people can come in, be a little bit afraid of that. And I think parents can rest easy when they see that our guides are taking care of their kids in a way that's really thoughtful and meeting them where they are. And it's a challenge by choice situation. And rather than it being like a flips for tips and we'll catch you downriver kind of thing, it's really like a situation where you come in and we want you to come back and do it again with us or somewhere else, and you don't get that if you're not seeing people, and especially children, where they are, because that's formative. You have a bad time as a kid, man. Now the river's scary. You're probably never going back. You lose
Oh,
that
yeah.
person to the outdoor recreation space. But if you can show them that like there's empathy and love and all that tucked into these sports, that they'll come back and be better for it as adults.
I used to teach sport rappelling
Ooh,
just for fun.
yeah,
And you guys have high ropes course there, right?
yes,
Zip lines and the whole 9 yards. Boy, you talking about challenging people. You put them in a situation where they are safe. There's
right,
not no risk, but there's very little real risk, but it feels so
yeah,
risky. You find out what you're made of. It's a way to test your metal, but it's not only that. Iron sharpens iron. I mean, when you have those experiences, you become it.
right.
I bet you have hundreds of stories, especially about young people who found out something about themselves that they didn't know before.
It is truly the crucible of self-exploration out here. It is. The river and the woods, and you kind of hit it on the head there. Like the high ropes and zip lines, when you look at it technically, is pretty controlled. You're
Yeah.
under pretty strict guidance there. The gear is inspected daily. It's all rated up to thousands of pounds. But when you got to take the step off the zip line platform and just
Yeah.
trust that everything is there and that there's someone on the other end ready to receive you, I've seen kids all the way up to people in their 90s take this on. And there's always that hesitation moment right there at the end. Some longer than others, but the ones that push through it and make it to the other end, I can just see their confidence building. And it happens, like I said, from kids to adults. There's that chest puffs out a little bit after you get a chance to prove to yourself and maybe to your social circle, like, hey, I did that. That's pretty cool. If you're not in that pro guide mode, you might not even notice. You might be like, all right, next trip.
uh,
But when you're watching your people and seeing them
right.
grow and congratulating them on that, that's where growth happens. And I think that's like the most beautiful thing that we could offer anybody, is like a chance to walk away from their trip feeling like they did something cool.
I'm going to ask you about this, and I'm not expecting that you're the expert at this one.
I'm not the
Okay.
expert at anything.
But you might surprise me. So I grew up in water. Literally, water was everything.
Hmm.
And so very, very comfortable in water. When I started kayaking years ago, learning to manage the boat was a bit scary.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of hanging upside down in a river with rocks going under my head, and you know, it, you can bail out of the boat, but then it's so much work to get back in, and I did not have a bomb-proof roll.
Yeah.
I had a roll, but not bomb proof.
Right.
And it seems like it failed me when I most needed it to work. So I was over a class 4 drop, and I was in the wrong headspace. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is not even fun right now. And so, Dan, I parked the kayak on the shore and I jumped in the water and I swam it. And I did that because I'm not uncomfortable swimming rapids, but I
Right.
was uncomfortable in the boat.
That's
I
a
know that
wise
sounds
move.
nuts, but anyway, it worked for me, and it's kind of backwards. And a lot of people would say, "Oh," but I didn't feel like the boat was my safety. I felt like the boat was my toy, you know?
Yeah.
And so, anyway, all of that said, that really helped my attitude. But here's the big question related to this. I recently started looking into riverboarding just a little bit.
Hmm.
We're actually swimming the rapids with like a boogie board, something like that. And I thought, oh, now that might be. Have you ever done it? Do you know anything about riverboarding?
Oh man, I this is really funny and timely. One of our longtime guides, Angelo, was telling me about his new riverboard that he was using last weekend, and I thought he was crazy. And I've seen people do it. It's not uncommon out here. People love riverboarding on these rivers, but for some reason, maybe it's mental. I like being in the kayak more than a riverboard. I don't know. It's not my say. It feels. I probably felt the same way you did in your experience. I don't know. I would have been nervous on a riverboard.
Yeah. Well, another thing that my son and I are talking about starting to do is, and this one's going to sound really weird, snorkeling rapids. And not for the sake of the rapid, but for the sake of what you can see on the bottom of these rivers. And these
Yes.
are clean running rivers. And when you put the snorkel on, put on your wetsuit, put on a snorkel, and you do a float trip where you're really under the water instead of above the water with your vision anyway, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, huh, so you combine that with riverboarding to get through the really bad stuff.
What
I
a
don't
genius,
know.
really. No, when you put it that way, because I have snorkeled rapids, and I love the treasure hunt. Find everything from GoPros to wedding rings down there. Um, but a riverboard would be a great way to do that. So maybe you just shifted my paradigm on riverboarding. I think it sounds and looks fun, but not as fun as a kayak. So I guess it's kind of like why I've never gone skiing. I love snowboarding too much. And so to
Oh,
sacrifice a
yeah.
day to do that, I just had never have done it. But maybe I need to broaden my horizons.
Well, it's kind of fun. When we started the Adventure Sports podcast 10 years ago, many of the modern day adventure sports didn't exist yet, or they were just
Right.
getting started.
Hmm.
And
Because you've
so
been
I
around, you've
keep
been doing
on.
this for 11, 12 years. Is that
Well,
right?
it
Longer
no
than
more
that?
like 10 and a half almost.
Yeah.
It's yeah, so we started on February 28th 10 years ago. So I guess that's we're a third of the way through our 11th year.
That's incredible. I mean, yeah, think about how much has changed in the industry since then.
Oh yeah. And a lot of the people we interviewed back then have aged out completely, and other people, they were in diapers almost. I mean, now they're
Right.
starting. They were young teens, and now they're doing the adventure sports. And I just think it's a beautiful thing to think, wow, that we actually have multiple generations that have been exploring the out of doors, exploring adventure, and coming up with all new ways to experience it. So I don't know. I think it's a lot of fun. And so my latest thought is riverboarding is young, like
Yeah.
SUP, stand up paddleboarding. That was just barely a thing when our podcast started, and now it's
Right.
everywhere, you
Yeah,
know?
you can't escape it. It's everywhere.
Or the hydrofoil kite surfing,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. That didn't exist. So there's so many new ways to do things, and I was thinking, could we snorkel and riverboard in rapids, and what would that be like?
So now we need another decade to look back on this moment and decide how it went, I guess. So I think we should do it.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
One of the things that we used to do here in Colorado is we'd wait until wintertime and then we'd find a mountain that wasn't too huge and we'd drag our kayaks up the mountain and then we would toboggan in the kayaks down to the river and drop off of whatever bluff there was and splash into the water and keep on going on the whitewater run. Of course, it's a little chilly in the wintertime, but combining like snowboarding
All right.
with whitewater all in the same trip, it was a hoot, dude. So fun.
I've seen some really incredible athletes who will, do that same thing. They'll like skin up the side of the mountain, drop their like skis on the back of their kayak, run it down like you guys did, or ski down. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, like a multi-sport day. And I mean, it's not for everybody, but those who are crazy enough to chase those multi-sport days, there's like nothing. I'm sure you feel the same way. Those days doing those like kind of crazy, intense, not ideal weather condition runs are some of the best times out there. You got your
Yes.
pogies, dry suit, you're doing a whole, I call it like a Taylor Swift outfit change. You got to change everything out and start all over. Those are special days. There's not a lot of those out there.
Yeah. I want to point something out. We're just kind of goofing off talking about all different types of outdoor sports now, but we both have these huge grins on our faces and just
Yeah.
remembering that there was this time I did this thing. That's part of what it's about. That's why people should say, you know what, I'm going to go up to northern Wisconsin. I'm going to try out Class 4 Rapids in Wisconsin because I'm not done it. And if you stay home, you'll forget that day. If you go into northern Wisconsin and have a life experience, then you will remember it for the rest of your life. And then you'll be talking and smiling. And, I heard someone say the other day, people are getting stretch marks in their face for smiling so much. And I thought,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
that's
I am
that's a beautiful thing.
a lot older now than when I started this, so I'll turn 32 this summer. And I have crow's feet, encroaching on the corners of my eyes now, and
Yeah.
it reminds me of my dad and my mom. They both just laughed so much, and they still do. And I looked at
Uh,
those as like a badge of honor. And now I look in the mirror, and I'm starting to get them too. And yeah, it makes me think back, like you said, of all the smiles and love and the intense and fun experiences I've had. A lot of them here. I've spent most of
yeah.
my adult life in and around Wisconsin and around Wildman. I started working here in 2015, and it's been incredible. And to see so many other people start forming those memories together, whether it be
Yeah.
off the high ropes course or paintball or rafting, you're watching the families go home closer than they were when they came in. I've had parents, talking about they haven't seen their kids look up from their phone in 3 hours straight, and then they go
Right.
on the
Yeah.
rafting trip and they see the photos and they're like seeing a side of them that they haven't seen in a long time. And it's pretty easy to just, I always say it's better off sideways and downriver than on the couch. That means even if the day goes awry and your boat flips and you're swimming, you could have been stuck at home. And it's a different kind of stretch mark when you're just eating potato chips on the couch all the time. So if I can do that from
Yes.
my smiles and grinning, and share that with others, I think that is the key to a life well lived, and getting to like share, like you said, we're both just grinning, talking through our experiences and kind of living it
Yeah.
through each other. And like I know how you feel, you probably know how I feel about those things, and that's a pretty cool like universally shared experience between adventurers.
It is fun. Super fun. Speaking of, you said Grand Canyon.
I did.
Dude. All right. So not many people have boated the Grand Canyon. But since you have, what is that like?
That was like my Everest,
Oh yeah.
soon as I started getting into whitewater and realizing that I was in love with it the way I was watching these videos with my friends, on a broke down school bus on this old TV. We got YouTube on somehow. I don't even know how we did that. But we'd just be watching kayakers and rafters do all these crazy cool things. And we'd look at them and be like, man, if one day we could do that. And so one of those guys that I grew up doing that with called me, and him and his wife pulled a permit. First time they applied.
Really?
And that's when it hit me that I was going to go down 25 days in the big ditch with some of my best friends and people that I had like dreamt of this moment with for a really long time. And any amount of explanation I would give it would be a discourtesy to the actual trip because it is truly
Hmm.
grand on a spectacle scale that I can't ever put into words. I stopped journaling at times when I was down there because I was like, I won't even know what I was talking about, when I was down there. Um, And a lot of it is the river and the landscape and the history and how lucky we are to get to have that space and how sacred it is and how much we need to be thinking about water as we continue
Yeah.
to enjoy that space. And that's all great. But then, you're on day like 17 and you realize you haven't answered an email for 3 weeks.
Hmm.
And even you might be on groover duty, but you don't care, it's good. And you're with your friends and you're laughing and playing music and you're silly. And you realize that like this is the whole point of everything, right? Is to get lost with your pals in like a beautiful wilderness and be silly. Have joyous moments. You know, your abs hurt from laughter. Play music together, cook together, clean together, scout rapids together.
Yeah.
Man, I can very clearly remember the stress and anguish we felt at a couple rapids scouting it and then watching your friends go through that. And I had never rowed an 18-foot boat until that trip for more than, you know, a small portion. So the idea of going 281 miles rowing a boat that I was responsible for was like super intimidating. I had no idea if I could even do it. I remember after day one, I was like, I'm not cut out for this. I'm not. But by, you know, the land of the giants and the gems and all that stuff kind of in the middle of the trip, was kind of like, hey, man, you're doing it. This is great. And I had such a great support crew with people I trusted and loved that it made it truly incredible. So I guess the point of that whole entire rambling is if you ever have a chance to do it, clear your schedule, quit your job, go do it. It's totally worth it.
Wow. You know, one thing about rafting that's super cool, and I'm contrasting with kayaking here,
Yeah,
at least whitewater kayaking. You don't have a lot of room in a kayak for stuff, gear, and, you know, so you're pretty much doing day trips in a kayak unless you have a support wagon, which is the raft,
right,
right? And you
right.
can do these extended, how long did you say 28 days?
We did 25, 25.
25 days.
Mhm.
25 days. So you can support that kind of a trip out of rafts.
Oh yeah, we still had ice for cocktails on day 24. So uh, we
Dang.
we outfitted through a company called Monkopi, and phenomenal. They did a phenomenal job. I mean, we ate like salmon planks and steaks, and it was great. So you can do things out of a rafting trip that make it feel very comfortable. I had a beautiful sleeping pad. We had multiple musical instruments. We had like light up lights for our campgrounds. Everybody had nice chairs, and that's the beauty of a raft trip is whatever you can
Right.
put in there, you can generally take. So it's different. And that's why I don't backpack because I've been spoiled. You know,
Right.
I've been spoiled.
I have to defend all the backpackers out there just a little bit. There's an element to backpacking that is learning how to be comfortable with much less.
Sure.
That is actually part of the enjoyment of it eventually. I mean, at first you think, oh, I'm roughing it. No, that's not comfortable. You know, whatever it is. But then it kind of turns into nature provides.
Hmm.
Finding just the right place to sit down sounds so small, but if you get good at that as a backpacker, it'll change the whole experience that you could just, oh, I can be really comfortable right there. You
Man,
know what
I
I'm
had
saying?
never even thought of that, but that is a beautiful moment. See, this is why it's important to have intersport friendships, right? You know, I myself probably am not going to plan like a backpacking trip, but I have a lot of friends that love it, you know?
Yeah.
So I need
Yeah.
one of them to grab me by the hand and drag me out there because I envy the experience you just shared of finding the perfect place to sit. Like in my head right now, I'm thinking I need to chase that.
Well, it is a thing, and it's not a thing that people talk about a lot, but I really like the idea of how little can I take
Hmm.
and be completely at ease. You know, that's part of the sport. But I would love to do a raft trip with your steaks and your salmon planks and a nice, comfortable chair. Why go with a guide? I've asked that question of a few guides, but why should someone, if they're getting into an adventure sport, say, you know what, I know I could probably figure this out, or I could learn from some buddies, or, you know, but what's the advantage of going to the guide and saying, you know, I want to do my first trip with you?
Yeah, I highly recommend if you're interested in a sport, curious about it, want to go, bring your family or your friends with you to do it through a guiding service, through an outfitter, or through a professional guide. You are introducing yourself to something that has a fairly large barrier to entry most of the time
Yeah.
when you think about these sports. I mean, the cost of equipment, the cost of rafts, just the cost alone for a lot of these things is pretty huge. So there's like that barrier of how am I going to afford to do this on my own? That I think is important to make sure that you like what you're doing before you do it. So that's like step one. Do I like this thing? Do I actually want to spend money on it? There's that barrier. The next barrier for most things is a skill barrier. If you want to go with a guiding service, you're going with a company, a reputable company that has guides who are well trained. Like I mentioned earlier, maybe doing swiftwater rescue trainings, doing first aid CPR, maybe even woofer trainings, wilderness first aid,
Yeah, yeah,
where you are with people who understand how to make things happen well and can react when things don't go as planned, which we're in nature. She's rather unpredictable at times. It's good to have someone there that you can trust to take care of you through, thick and thin. So those are the two kind of things I think of right off the top of my head is make sure you like it before you invest into the sport. And then go with somebody who knows what they're talking about, and you're gonna have a lot better time than, trying to put all these random pieces together on your own. And then you can ask questions. So I love when people show up and they are asking people, how did you get into this? What skills do you need to have? I
yeah.
know personally, if I'm guiding, I'm taking that person under my wing and I'm showing them. And, I tell them we start hiring in December. So if you're ready to come learn, I've got a great place for you to learn with great leadership that's going to help you get there. So finding the people that are going to take you and not just because they're getting paid to, but because they love what they're doing is a totally
Right.
different experience than picking up a raft off a Facebook Marketplace and deciding to go run numbers on the Arkansas. That's going to be a tough day.
Oh, you're bringing it home to Colorado now.
Yeah, I thought I might give you something that
Yeah,
was
that's
not
just
too
over the
too
ridge
far from
from us,
home.
man.
Yeah, I figured I'd give you something fun. I just love that stretch of water too. So,
Yeah,
but
that's
yeah, in
awesome.
short, go with somebody who's going to care about you and show you before you make that leap into a sport that you're not totally sure about, and you'll probably learn a ton before you do that on your own.
Yeah, I think the idea of accelerating the learning curve is that alone. I mean, everything you said was good, but that one, I think, man, it takes so long to learn how to do some of this
Yeah.
stuff. But you can learn how to do it safely, do it well, do it fun, so much faster if you have an expert.
Like I said, inherently dangerous, right? Like everything that we do has that air of Mother Nature in it. And if you don't know how to handle that, if you don't know how to swim a rapid, you shouldn't be in it. Figure
Yeah,
out how to do that
yeah.
first. And I'll tell you, any outfitter across the country that does rafting trips, in their first part of that trip is going to show you how to swim a rapid, and that's going to be a beneficial learning moment for you if you want to continue doing whitewater related sports.
Oh, that's awesome. And why not? Why
Right?
not? Well, Dan, we're running out of time. I enjoyed this a lot. We didn't go into a deep dive into just one sport, but what we did is talk a lot about the why of doing adventure sports and finding out a little bit about northern Wisconsin. I didn't know. I'm glad I know now.
So I've got a spot for you whenever you're ready.
Okay, let's do it. Wildman Adventure Resort. The website is that the same?
www.wildmanresort.com.
Wildmanresort.com. You are Dan Camp, the general manager,
That's me.
and name the rivers again.
The Menominee River, class 2 to class 4, I think big rafts, guide in the back. Then we have the Peshtigo River, which during the summer is actually more of like a ducky trip, class 2 to class 3, but really pretty much nonstop fun on that trip. And then if you're really adventurous, our like big water season is in like the end of April, and we'll run our bigger rafts on the Peshtigo River for about 5 miles. It's
Wow.
nonstop fun. It's really great.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dan, for your time.
I feel like we can keep
I'm
going. I love
inspired.
talking to you. This is great. Yeah, I feel like I judge a good conversation by how like I feel like I can run through a brick wall afterwards, and I'm ready to run through some brick walls. So
Well, you make me want to go jump in the river real fast here. I mean, it's it's a beautiful thing. So thank you very much for sharing with us, and for all the watchers and listeners out there, man, thank you for being a part of the Adventure Sports Podcast community. And make sure I don't know how you or what sport it's going to be, but make sure you pick one and you get out there and have some fun.